Hi, I'm Peter Lindemann, and today we're going to be looking at assembling one of the new Bedini SG Energizer kits. You may or may not have purchased the Bedini SG, the Complete Beginner's Handbook, and this kit is essentially built to the specifications of the model that you can build directly from that book. So it is the exact same design, the exact same circuits, the exact same frame, dimensions, everything as what is described in the book. So you can either build it from the book, or you can buy these prefabricated kits that you can just assemble. And so today what I want to do is I'm going to go through the process. I'm going to show you what comes in the kit, and then we'll assemble the kit. Okay, let's do a quick inventory here. You can see I've taken most of the parts out of the box that it comes in. It comes in a big 18 by 18 box, and so we have all the parts laid out here. These are the frame. Here's the fan that comes with it. There's a plastic base down below. Over here we've got the circuit laid out pretty much on the circuit board. We got the coil that's already pre-wound. We've got the bicycle wheel here and the magnets, and we've even got, John was so kind to put every kit that has a little form where you can, so it shows you exactly where to mount the magnets on the wheel. And so all of these things come in the kit, and so what we're going to do first is we're going to start building the frame up so that we can start attaching all these other things. So let's go. Okay, I've got a lot of this stuff out of the box now, and so we can see that these upright sections are going to be attached to the frame here. And so I'm going to have to peel this paper off of this because this is just a protective piece. So, and it has all these holes and different mount holes and things, so this is going to be pretty easy to do. And I'm also going to, you can see in here, this nice landing for the bearings to be put in. So all of these features are very nice in this kit. We're going to put the feet on the bottom of the base so that isn't just plastic on wood or something. It's going to have a nice quiet riding surface. These are the feet for that. I've got all the plastic nuts and bolts to hold all these things together in here, and these are plastic so that there's no extra iron around where the magnetic fields are operating. So this is nice. The nice thing about this is they're plastic and they're lightweight, but because they're plastic, you can't over tighten them. You may strip out the threads. So we're going to be careful. We can tighten them to a reasonable amount to hold the whole thing together, but we're not going to try and tighten them the way we would with a metal nut and bolt. These are the magnets that we're going to put on the wheel, and so I'm going to take these things and put them aside right now so they don't erase all the credit cards in my wallet. And so we've also got the wheel, and we're going to add some shaft extensions, and that's going to help us get around the bearing system in the wheel here. We're going to tighten that up, and we're going to put these shaft extensions on there so we can actually pull the power of the wheel turning out on a shaft so we can run that fan that I showed you earlier. So, so I've got all these things laid out here, and so now we're going to start assembling the uprights and put the shaft extensions on the wheel and start the assembly. Okay, I'm going to start right here and start working on taking this paper off, and you may see that yours comes off easily, but this one's getting a little bit tough to start. And so what I'm going to dig at it with my fingernail a little bit here. So if you have a little bit of trouble getting it started, don't be too surprised. But as soon as it starts coming, you see, as soon as you start getting it, then it should be able to come off pretty much in a single pull. And anytime it does that, you can see you want to stop and then reset all these things so that you don't tear it and force it to become shorter pieces. So it is possible to pretty much get this off all as one piece right there, and that keeps it clean, and you can see the nice Bedini logo that's been etched into the plastic. And so I'm going to do this to all the other surfaces here off camera to save a little time on this film. Okay, the next operation is we're going to take the wheel and we're going to put the shaft extensions on it. Okay? So here's what we got to do. We're going to take the outer nuts off on both sides. And what we're left with is a situation where we have an inner nut and then a dark nut and on the dark shaft. Now in this situation here, you see I can hold on to the wheel and it runs on the bearings that are in the wheel as it is. Okay, and this is in pretty straight condition, so that's pretty good. Hopefully yours will be that good too. Now what we're going to need to do is I need to loosen one of these, okay? And I'm going to take this off. Now you may need wrenches and a bunch of other stuff to get this bolt away from this one. And if you do, just do your best. You need to do this at least from one side if you can't get the other one loose. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with this wrench, and this is a 9/16. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this inner bolt here, and I'm going to put a hold wrench on this side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tighten this just ever so much, and what I'm doing is I'm putting too much pressure on the internal bearings of the wheel. I'm binding the bearing system so that it no longer turns, okay? And this is going to give me the basis for bringing the power out on the shaft. Okay, so I need to, you can see I can still turn it a little bit, so I'm going to tighten it just a little bit more. Okay, you don't want to over tighten it, but you also don't want to under tighten it. You don't want to get to a place somewhere a month from now where this loosens up and starts turning. Okay, so I've got this bound up now, and now the wheel will not turn at all. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this extra nut back on here. I'm going to be able to use that in another, and I'm going to take one of these shafts and I'm going to screw this on here. And I'll take the other shaft and I'm going to screw it on this side. There we go. And I've got a really good situation here where the bearings are tight and I can bring the power out of my shaft. So this is what that's going to look like when you've gotten it that far. And you notice that both of these are about the same size, and so either side will work for either side. That's good. And by the way, there aren't any instructions on this, so this film is your instructions. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the base that should come pretty much pre-assembled like this, okay? And I'm going to flip it over like that, and I'm going to put the feet on the bottom here. And hopefully anybody who has one of these kits is going to have these feet are set it up. They come with 4 little screws and 4 of these things. And so the plastic is pre-threaded with this thread. And hopefully your tool set's good, because this is a 4 millimeter hex drive. And I'm going to screw that in. Okay, and I can, because the threads are pretty deep, I can tighten that pretty good, so we don't want that wobbling around. And then to put the foot on it, you just slide that over like that. Okay? So I'm going to do the others off camera, so you don't have to be bored by that. Okay, as you can see, I've got all 4 of the feet on here now. And this is a nice foot. And so this is the front plate here, so I'm going to bring this back around over to here, and that gives us a nice solid base. And the next operation is I'm going to be mounting the verticals on either side. Okay? So that's the next step. Okay, the next operation is we're going to mount one of the verticals on this side here, like this. And so that's what we're going to do. I've got a bag of all the little nuts and washers and stuff, and hopefully you'll have a scissors at home. Okay, so I got a bag of the washers, and I've got a bag of the nuts, and a bag of the bolts. And these are Ziploc, so I can get into those more easily now. So I can put those away. And so what I'm going to do, I want to get out 4 of these plastic nuts. And I'll lift this up, and I'm going to just slide those in through the holes. Like that. Okay. And you can see that this can be moved back and forth. There's a little bit of play there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start, and that may or may not stand up to you, so be careful. I've got 4 of these nuts, and looks like I should have a washer on each of these on the outside too. So, recognizing my silly error, I'm going to quickly put a washer there, and then a washer on the back, and then just tighten up the first one, just keeping it fairly loose. And these plastic nuts and bolts can just be hand tight. Don't really have to use wrenches on them, because they're strong, but any kind of forces applied with a metal wrench of some sort is going to have the possibility of just stripping these threads out, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to slip these extra washers I've had in my hand back in the bag. And what you see with these kits is that you usually get a couple of extra of everything that you need. So in general, what we're going to do is we're going to set this up so that the center, this is a centering hole, is pretty much just lined up with the center. We're going to put the coil in this hole here, and so we want the bearing pretty much centered up like that. So we can just hand tighten this in this position, figuring we won't have to move it too much later on. Okay, so that's the first vertical, and before we do the second vertical, there's something else we have to do. We're going to have to put in the bearings, because now that our shaft is long, we're going to have to put the bearing in here and put the wheel in here and the bearing in the other unit before we actually mount the second vertical. Otherwise there's no way to get it in. So I'll break away now and we'll set this up. Okay, I've got the bearing that I've taken out of the package. Okay, and here's the hole, and of course we want to make sure that when we put this, we have the outer lip the outer retaining lip on the outside here. So we're going to be mounting the bearing from the inner race, and the machining dimension is pretty tight here. It's what's called a press fit. So I'm just going to very carefully work this bearing in till it seats as deeply into the plastic as I can. I'm going to do this all by hand. And that's pretty much it. It's going to look pretty much like that. And you can see around the front here is that I'm pretty much up against the lip on the inside. So that's pretty much what it's going to look like. I'll do the other one and then we'll get ready to mount the wheel. Okay, so what I've done is I've got the other bearing in the other side, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this thing around. And what we've done is we've loosened up these nuts and dropped this coil mounting base. We've dropped it all the way to the bottom of its travel, so we don't have to put the coil in before we put in the wheel and the shaft. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around so that it's in the right direction. I'm going to grab our wheel and kind of as sneaky as I can be here, without torquing anything badly. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to again just get some these just basically holding in the right location. Okay, and then I'm going to get more serious and put the washer on and do it right. Here, so I'll get this bottom one properly in place with washers on both the front and the back there. And I can, now that that's secured, I know that this vertical isn't going to go anywhere. And then I can come back, do that. If you have the opportunity to build this with a friend, sometimes you can see some of these operations would be a little bit easier if there was somebody else extra hand holding something here or there. We've almost got this. Okay, now you remember I tried to line this center bolt up there with the other side, so I'm going to kind of loosen these now and kind of move this over a little bit to now we see so that's pretty good. That's what we want. Okay, so I can pretty much tighten these now. And we're ready for the next operation. Okay, mechanically there's just one more thing to do, and that's to put these little shaft collars on here so that once we get this thing rolling, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay. Now I'm using a 3mm hex wrench this time. And I'm just going to, I don't want to, I'm very tight against the plastic here. I just want to make sure that this isn't going to go anywhere. We don't want it to produce a lot of friction. But we also don't want the shaft to be moving side to side when the forces of the magnets start operating on it. So this is pretty good. So this is what the kit is. So the physical part of the frame and the wheel are now in place. So we still have to mount the magnets on the wheel and put the coil in the holder down here, and then the next thing we'll do is we'll build up the circuit board. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the magnets on the wheel. You can see we've got the wheel mounted here and our frame, and everything is good so far. And now we've got the magnets, okay? So the magnets in the kit come like this, and as you can see they're completely unmarked. And as we know from the book, we need to have our magnets facing north face out, all of them the same way. So I'm going to just open these up a little bit. Maybe I'll open them up a lot. Hold on a second. Okay, so here they are. Here's the magnets. Okay. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we've unwrapped our magnets, and now we see that there's no markings on these magnets. And we know that we have to place them all on the wheel so that all the north poles face out. So the question is, how do we find out which pole is what? So we're going to show you 3 ways of doing this. And so the first one, if you're really cool and you are an advanced experimenter, you may have a tool like this. This is called an electronic magnetic pole indicator. Very, very handy, because all I have to do is take this tool and bring it up to the thing, push the button, and it instantly tells me that that's the North Pole. Pretty simple. And it makes this obnoxious noise just to let you know that it's using up the battery. But if I come over here, and again, do the same thing, it tells me that this is the South Pole. So lucky we're still in the same universe where the magnet has one pole and the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, because we know that this one is north, so I'm going to mark this with a black marker, and I'm just going to call it north, okay? Now, let's say that like 99% of everybody on the planet, or 99.9999%, you don't have one of these things. So what are the other ways of finding out which polarity the magnet is? Well, if you're most people may have a compass in the house, okay? You may not walk in the woods much, but you may still have a compass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this compass up to the magnet, okay? And what we see is, we know we marked this one north here, and what we see is that the section of the compass that points towards the north is the south. Yes, the south points towards the north magnet, okay? Because that's attracted, okay? Don't be confused about this. Okay, the south is going to point towards the North Pole. Okay. Now, the last way we can find out is electrically. And here, this is a reprint of page 50 of the Bedini SG, the Complete Beginner's Manual. Okay, and on that page we talk about what's going to happen if we put electricity into a coil, which way it's going to magnetize. Okay, so what we can do is we can take the coil that comes with our kit, you see, and by having it upside down like this, instead of trying to balance it up on this, we can see that that's set up like this, with the bottom going in around counterclockwise like this, and the top coming in and going around this way. So it's going to be easy to set it up so that it runs this way, and we can put a south at the top, and so that will either repel the south or attract the north. Okay, so that's something that you may be able to do, because I'm assuming that if you're going to be doing an experiment like this, you've got a battery and you've got a coil, and so we can run this little experiment. So what we've done here is I have scraped a little bit of the insulation off of one wire here on this end, and I found the other end, and I scraped a little bit of that insulation off. You can see that the difference between the red and the open copper here. Hopefully you can see that color difference. Okay, so the bottom, according to our directions, the bottom one is going to go to the negative of the battery. So I'm just going to slide this thing in here. Doesn't have to. It's not a big complicated contact here. And then the other one's going to go over here, and you can see that I've got contact here, so that's good. Okay, so I'm just gonna hook this up, stick this in here so it holds on. And now what that means is that since I've hooked this up with the positive to the top and the negative to the bottom, that this is going to be a south pole. Okay, now we know this is north because we marked it, and so we know this is going to be south. Okay, so for one end it's going to repel, and this is pretty soft. Okay, and the other end is going to attract, and this is pretty strong. So you can see that this is definitely a south. Okay, so this is pretty spongy, and this is pretty strong attraction, as you can see. So that is the third way you can determine which polarity the magnets are. So now that we know, I'm going to mark a whole bunch of these, and we're going to stick them on the wheel. Okay, we're going to start marking these now, and you can see that we've got one marked. We've got a couple others marked. So the simplest way of marking all of these is if I just mark one, take it off, toss it on the wheel, mark the next one, like that, toss it on the wheel. We're not worried about where they're going right now. But this is a very simple way of marking them. That way I get them all the same. I'm marking all the same faces in the same direction. I don't have to take them apart or do anything weird. And this way I know that I'm marking all the same polarity in the same way. ready to go. Okay, so what we can do is we can just take this spacing tool, spacing tool is just about right. Okay. So then we can just straighten these things out this way. Into place pretty good. So now you can see that the gauge is riding on top of the magnets. Okay, and now when I look at them from this end, they're all pretty straight. Okay, and they're all pretty even side to side. Okay, for this first 7. Okay. Okay, so we've fussed with the tool and we've done a bunch of stuff, but we've got the first 7 of the magnets. They're all the little ends are facing out, see? And so they're just sitting on the steel rim right now, all just by their own magnetism. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue them, okay? And this is a local brand of super glue, but any brand of super glue will work. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is this stuff is for slightly thicker formula, so it tends to flow better. But I'm just going to lay a bead on each one of these. Like that. Of course, I don't want to move the magnet. So I'm being very careful about how much pressure I'm putting on this. Just enough pressure to lay the glue in so that it touches both the rim and the magnet. Okay. Then I'm going to come around and do it on the other side. I've got a little spray stuff that I can make this glue set up instantly, so we can stop all this dripping. So you may or may not have anything like this. So but just realize that all of these types of things are available, and each of these steps can be made simpler. If the more tools you have, the easier the work. So we're going to just clean this up a little bit, get some of this kicker off of the magnets, and then off camera we're just going to finish putting the magnets on. So, but you get the idea of the process. And it's important that you do, if you take your time with this step, make sure that they're pretty well spaced, because if you ever do come back and want to use this wheel with multiple coils and things like that, then you're going to want to make sure that they're spaced really evenly. And there's no sense in skipping the effort it takes to do it this step. If you remember from the beginner's handbook, the long and detailed procedure that we showed you how to wind this coil. And again, each of the steps in the process of building this thing is important to do carefully. If you're doing it for the first time, then take your time. Don't be in a hurry to finish. Be in a hurry to do it right the first time, and then you'll get the results you're looking for. Okay, when I get these all on, we'll be back. Okay, we've got all our magnets on here now, and one thing we found in putting our kit together, there's 21 magnets around this rim, and this spacer guide is a good place to start as far as placing the magnets on here. But what we found is that the spacing, to get them all evenly spaced, the spacing between the magnets is going to have to be just ever so slightly different than what the guide shows. So use it as a guide rather than as a measuring tool, and get all the magnets on the wheel, and then you can come around and basically kind of start spacing them as evenly as you can, and getting them side to side straight and level straight. And once you have them all as evenly spaced and as straight as you can, then start the gluing operation. And what you find is that the wheel isn't perfectly balanced, and then after you get the glue and the different things on here, there's going to be a little bit of imbalance in the wheel, which you can see right now. And you can see that there's going to be a little heavy spot, which is what it's seeking right now. And so one thing that I do mention in the handbook, but it isn't mentioned in the kit or anything else, is that you may want to balance this wheel. So in this particular case, we'll do an operation to show you how to physically balance the wheel before we finish the whole kit. So right now, and we're going to want to do that before the coil is placed, so that the attraction of the magnet to the core isn't involved. We're going to balance the wheel in another step, and we'll do that sometime soon. Okay, so we've got the wheel with the magnets and everything. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the electronic parts on the board. So you can see we've taken what we got with the kit. We've got the transistors, we've got the diodes, we've got the resistors. These are the main parts that are going to go onto the board. But there's also this resistor here, and there's also these nuts and bolts here. These are standoffs that we'll show you how to mount. And so these are the parts that will be put on the board, and we're going to start that operation now. Okay, so here's our little workstation here. We've got a soldering iron. I got this warming up right now. I've got a little bitty vise arrangement here to hold the board so that I can solder on it without trying to hold it at the same time. I've got my solder. This is a very small diameter solder with a water-soluble flux in it that's used for commercial soldering. You probably won't be able to get anything like that, but you'll be able to get a solder that you can clean up in some way. And I've got a needle nose pliers here, and I've got a little trimmer cutter. So after we solder the parts on, I can trim off the extra. So this is the general workstation. I also have a little extra liquid fluxing material that we've made up out of citric acid and water. So this is our little workstation, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting parts on the board. And what we're going to do is, you can see that all these parts have different sizes and shapes and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the parts that are going to be the lowest on the board on first, and then the parts that stick up more on second, so that they don't get in the way of the other earlier operations. So that's what I'm going to start doing right now. Okay, so the only way we know what to do here when we're looking at something like this is we have to go back to our drawing here that's going to tell us what part goes where. Okay, and so the parts that I have loose for the first right now are these resistors. These are the base resistors for the diagram. And so I'm going to find where those go, and it looks like they're right here and here and here and here and so on in that position of the circuit. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take these and I'm going to bend the wires over, and I'm going to put that down on the board like that. See how I've placed that down? And then on the opposite side, the wires come out like this, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend those over like that. So now, no matter what I do with the board, the part stays in the right place, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all these on here and then solder them all at the same time. So this is typically how I would stuff a board. I try and put all the same part on the board in all the different positions, and then solder. Okay, so this is what the board looks like when all the resistors are put in place. And now I'm going to turn this over. You can see what this looks like. These really fine wires. Okay, and what you can see is, according to the drawing here, it says that even though it has room for two more over here, that these two over here are the ones that are not used. Okay, so I've only got the resistors in for these transistors over here. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to put this in our little holder like that. And so then that holds it while I then can now apply solder to these connections. Okay, so you can see that I really am 62 and I can't see this close without these glasses here. So what we're going to do, we've got a pretty fine tip on this soldering iron, and that makes the flow of solder very easy. And we have a wet sponge here, so we can always take material off. And we also have a tinning material here, so that if I can always re-silverize the tip. Okay, and all of these things help make the solder flow better. Now, typically when people try and solder, and if the solder doesn't flow, they think they need to turn the heat up. But what you really need to do is get the oxidation materials off, or use more flux, one or the other. So that's why we have this whole arrangement. So what we can see now is if I come up here and I just touch that, you see the solder flows very quickly and it flows cleanly. And so the amount of time I actually have to be touching any of these component parts is very short. Okay, this is what we want. We don't want to burn the part. We want to be able to get in, flow the solder, and get out. And so this operation is going very, very smoothly. Okay, and you can see why having the vise hold the board and all of these other little things make all of these processes easier. Okay, I'm just in and out. Okay, and notice I put the heat to the part, and I flow the solder to the part. I don't try and melt the solder onto the iron. I want to flow the solder to the part. So the iron has to be able to transfer the heat to the part. Okay? So we've soldered all of these resistors on now. Okay? They're all on there. And so the next step is I'm going to bring in a clipper like this, and I'm going to cut all of these off right at the edge, just like that. Best thing to do is to have a little garbage can nearby, which in this case we don't for the purposes of this demonstration. We're kind of doing this on a little desk where the lighting is better, and in our dingy shop. So even if you don't have exactly the right tools to do all these things, you can see with the right tools it's pretty easy. It looks happens quickly, and it works out really easily. But this is what you're going to want to. It's going to want to end up looking like this, regardless of how long it takes you. Okay. In other words, when we look at one of these solder joints, you can see at close inspection that the solder is shiny, and it is flowed evenly to both the trace on the board and to the part. And so each one of these things is a hot solder. Anything that would be balled up and maybe intermittent contact would be called a cold solder joint, and we don't want any of those. So that's the first step. We've got the resistors on the board, and now I'm going to start working on the diodes. Okay, next operation is the diodes. You can see the diodes come in this nice pack where they're kind of attached to each other by these strips. And so the first thing I have to do is kind of trim all these things off so I end up with individual diodes, and then I'm going to start putting them on the board. So I don't want to bore you with this little process here. I'm going to start cutting these away like this, and I'll have to do this on both sides. Okay. As you can see, they're kind of falling all over the place. That's just kind of the way it is. So there's my diodes, and I'm going to get these little strips out of here. Now, unlike the resistors, which I could just put in any way, because a resistor is a resistor, and electricity will flow through it in either direction, diode is a one-way valve for electricity, and electricity will only flow through it in one direction. And so what you see on this little device is that on one end there's this little stripe. Can you see that? Does that come out? There's a little stripe at this end, okay? And that's the cathode, and that's what's gonna. So if this side is more negative than this side, then electricity will flow, okay? And that's the valve, okay? And it's automatic and it's electronic. So what we have to do is we have to put these devices on the board in the right way, otherwise the circuit won't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up a bunch of these things. So we've got the wires down like this, and we're going to find the cathode for each one of these things, and then we're going to look back at the diagram, which will tell us how to put these on the board. Okay, so here's what I've done. Take a look. I've laid out these 14 diodes here, and so they're all facing with the cathode at this end. So I've lined them all up in the same way, and this is going to help me not make mistakes as I put these things together. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the diagram. And so all the ones across here, this little white line, or the dark line on this side, that's the cathode. That's the cathode. So the diagram tells me where the cathodes have to be. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. So I just pick one of these things up, and I find this spot coming off of there, and that's right here. And so I just push that down. And you see these wires on the diodes are a little bit thicker than on the resistors. So they're a little stiffer, okay? So that's the first one. Okay, So I've got the first 5. These are the output diodes that are going between the collectors and this outer collection wire here. So these are going to be the output diodes. And so coming around the board over here, now I've got to put these ones over here. And again, they're all in the same direction with the cathodes going to the outer trace. Just like that. So we want to make sure we've got that. Okay, so now what we see, so we put in these diodes here, 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 and around this one and this one. So that's what we've done so far. Okay, those are all the same part, the part that does the same thing in each of the sections of the circuit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick that back in here, and then I'm going to solder these up. Okay. Okay, so you see I've got all these solder joints done. Okay. Got all these solder joints done. Okay. Then I'm going to just take the trimmer and, like we did before, just cut them right off at the level of the board. There. Okay, so that's what the back looks like. Now this is what the front looks like. So far we haven't made any mistakes. We're good. Okay, next I'll load the other diodes. Okay, so like I said, we put in the diodes that will pick up the spike off the transistor. You can see they're coming off the central section of what the transistor is going to be. And now we're going to put in the other diodes, and these are the diodes that go from the base. You see this big fat base trace here, and so that's going to go from the base to the collector of the transistor here. So that's going to go right there like that. So on this first one, this unit has to go from here to here. Okay, so now I'm over here. I'm in this last section, so I've got this, and that cathode is the opposite direction. It's pushed all the way down. And then the last part here is this one. And that's cathode towards the base of the transistor again. So now they're all in there. So now I'm going to spread these out a little bit so that they don't tend to fall out. They're kind of stiff in there because the holes are fairly small, but I still like to just spread these legs out just a little bit so that there's no possible tendency for the part to fall out while I'm handling it. Okay, so there we are, and we can see that the cathodes are all in the same direction. That's what we want. Now we can solder. Okay, so I've got all of the secondary diodes in here, and they're all soldered in. Everything's looking good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the transistors. Okay, so that's these guys. Okay, And I know, I just happen to know, that this is the base, and this is the collector, and this is the emitter of this device. Okay? And I also know that this big fat trace here is the negative or ground line, and so I know that all the emitters are going to go directly to that. Okay, so when I look at the board, I can see where that big fat trace is, and when I put that here, I can see that this is the emitter, and so that's the one that's going to go there. So, and I want to push that down all the way right down to as low as I can get it, so that it's strong when I solder it. And so you can see now why we want to put this low stuff on the board before something big like this, because trying to put these little things in between would be really hard later on. So the next one goes like this, like that. So you see, once we get those two guys in there, getting this little diode in there would really be difficult, you see. So that's why we're doing these things in this order. So there they are, all 7 of those transistors, and again, these 2 are not being used. Okay. So I'm going to flip this thing over and solder them up. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the back now, and I'm going to clean up my tip here. I want to be able to flow the solder really well here, so I'm going to put it in the tinning can, clean up all the excess here, and then come right in here and hopefully we'll flow the solder really smoothly like that. Especially with components that cost this much, we really don't want to have the soldering iron attached to this for very long. Each one of these components is actually rated for how long and how much heat you can have on the device without hurting it. And I'm of course well within that range, using a good clean tip and this really small diameter solder which melts easily. So I'm just going to finish these things off and then we'll come back. Okay, so this is what it looks like. All these transistors are on the board now, and we've got good clean solder joints all the way across on these transistors. Okay, so there's only one part left to solder on, and that is the 10 watt 12 ohm resistor, which is used as the common, helps the circuit share the currents for all the different base resistors. So I'm just going to stick that down on there like that. Okay. And then this is going to be the final soldering operation for now. Okay. So I don't even need the holder anymore, because these transistors hold it up pretty well now. Okay, and that's it. I can just cut these guys off like that. And there's the board. That's the full circuit for our project. And what's nice about running this thing in the attraction mode is that we don't even need heat sinks on the transistors because they run so cold. So that's an added advantage of running it in this methodology. Okay. Okay. So we have the board now, and all the soldering is done on it except for maybe some little contacts that we may need to put on it later. But now you can see that we've got a whole bunch of bigger holes here, and there's a big hole for the central pin on each one of these transistors, and that goes to the collector. And of course we're going to have to connect the wires from our coil to each one of these things. And so to make that easy, what John has done is he's given us some screws as part of this kit, and we're just going to put that in like that, and then we're going to screw down a little nut. And of course we'll tighten that up. But that makes an electrical connection to the board and back up, and then we'll be able to screw, we're going to solder these little tips here onto the wires and another operation, and then we'll be able to just come in and just lay this on here and tighten it on, and that's how we'll interface the wires to the board. So we're just putting these what are called binding posts on the collectors of the transistors right now. So I'm going to put all those in, and then we'll come back. Okay, so I've got all these little binding posts here on the collectors, okay, and so I've got them kind of hand tightened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with my little needle nose pliers and grab that like that, and then with a little Phillips head I'm going to just tighten that up. And it's, you see, each one of these little things has a little kind of, it's like a lock washer right on the nut. And so once I tighten these things, they'll stay tight. So we got 7 of them, one on each of the collectors of the transistors, and then there's going to be one here, which is the final pickup wire. You see, every time the transistor turns off, then the coil discharges through this diode onto this trace here, and so that comes around here, so that we're going to put one here because this is going to be the main wire that goes back to charge the output battery. So we're going to put a binding post here. We're going to put a binding post here because this is the common resistor coming in from the trigger, the outside trigger, so we're going to put a binding post there. And there may be another one somewhere, and I'll figure it out. Thanks. We'll get those in. Okay, so as we got ready to put in more standoffs here, what we realized is that this hole here, which is labeled for both the ground and the trigger negative, should be drilled out to take should be drilled out like this to take a standoff, so we don't have to solder little wires in here, because this is going to be a big wire coming out to go to the negative of the primary battery, like here. The ground line from the primary battery goes to here and goes to here. So this needs to be a standoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill this out. Now these little standoffs, this is a number 6 screw with 32 threads per inch. So it's typically called a 6-32. And what we're going to do is we've got a number 20 drill here in the American system, or English system, or whatever system you think it is. It's not metric. And so I'm gonna start on the side with the trace, so I don't come through, and I'm gonna just very slowly drill this out. And I'm not in a hurry. Don't want it to bind the material. Okay. So, don't want a lot of pressure. Don't want to go very fast. So it looks pretty clean on both sides. And now I should be able to take one of these, put it right through, create my standoff. So I'm going to put these standoffs on and then we'll come back again. Okay, so here's our unit. We've got all the other little standoffs in. We put one here for the secondary positive output, which is where all the diodes lead to. Okay, we've got one for the trigger positive here against this big resistor, and we've got another primary negative here, which is where the negative of the trigger is going to go, and the major connection to the negative of the primary battery comes onto the and that's that big fat trace here. Okay, and so this is the one we drilled out to get that. So what we're going to do is we've decided to mount our board kind of like this on the face plate here, and we'll bring the wires from the coil around the bottom here and connect them underneath like that. And so there's really no provision here to attach this. We kind of have to keep them above these frame nuts, because as you can see, it's just slightly too big to fit in between them the way that's set up. So we're going to have to be just a little bit above those so they can be moved if they need to be. So we're going to, we've bought a couple of extra little nuts here, or bolts, and we're going to drill back up from the back, and we're going to drill 2 holes that will hold the board in place so that we can wire all this stuff together. So that's the next operation we're going to do, and this is optional. You can mount your board to this faceplate any way you want, but we wanted to make ours look nice and uniform, and the board straight on and things like that. So this is how we're going to do it, and it's optional. You can do it any way you want. Okay, so what we did was we drilled 2 new holes in the board, one here and one here. So you can see that it's not near anything else. Okay, so we've got our bolts. We drilled the holes. We've got them secured in there, and we've added another little nut here at a level that we can just now place the board. Slide that right on. All the spacing is good, and now you can see when we tighten it down against that, it's going to be nice and firm. And I'm using a little lock washer on there. And here. So when we attach all these wires, we want this to be pretty firm. We don't want this thing flopping around. So that's just compressing the lock washer. There it is. That's it. And now you can see that the board is very firmly attached to this faceplate, and we're good. Now we're ready. Now we have a basis for wiring these things up. So that's a good step. We still got to balance the wheel and then put the coil in here and keep hammering away at this until we're done. Okay, so we've got the board mounted here, and we've got the table for the coil down at the lowest position, And so now what we're going to do is we are going to do a critical weight balance on the wheel, and we have to do that before we put the coil in here so that we're not dealing with any magnetic forces. You can see that the wheel has basically stopped in this position, and so this is the first location where this point is appearing to be heavier than any other point on the wheel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark over here. I'll just come over here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to mark this spot right here on the wheel and call that the lightest point. Okay, and we may have to go through this 1 or 2 or 3 steps to get it so that it really doesn't care where it stops, which is what the balance is. This is a static balance method. It's not dynamic. But it's way good enough, and it'll make a big difference to keep the thing from jumping around, and it'll allow it to go to the highest speed with the least amount of losses. So what we're going to do is I've brought over a bag of different sized steel washers, and then we're just going to use these as counterweights on the system, that and a little bit of Scotch tape. So that we can find where we can balance the wheel. And what we'll find is that we won't have to add a lot of weight, but we want to add some so that it runs smoothly. So let's cut the tape, and I'll find some things that are close, and then we'll come back. Okay, so here's what we did. After fooling around with a bunch of washers, we found that this was the light spot, as we had marked before, and we found that one big heavy washer and one medium washer and one smaller washer, all taped to this zone, now allows the wheel to spin in a very, very balanced way. As you can see, it has no tendency to stop in any particular place, and it can travel very, very slowly without accelerating and decelerating and so on. And the most important thing is that with this counterweight here, we can even stop the wheel here where this was the heaviest spot before. So this is as balanced as we need to get it. But now when it runs, it will run very evenly, and regardless of slight motions one way or the other, it's still balanced by weight, and so it won't have a tendency to have parasitic oscillation on the bearings and other things like this that will tend to slow it down. So that's the operation for critically balancing the wheel by weight, and now we can mount the coil and finish the operation. Okay, the next operation is we're going to put in the coil, okay? And so the first thing we have to see is that this is the mechanism that's going to hold the coil down to the platform. And the first thing we have to do is we have to loosen this by untightening these screws that you can see in there. Okay, so we open that up so that we can so we take the coil, okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn this over like that, so that where it says top on there, if we wrote it that way. And so we've got wires coming out of the top, and we've got wires coming out of the bottom. And so the top, I'm going to feed both of these things through like this, coming in from the back side. That's why we've kind of turned this thing this way. And so the top wires are going to come out the top, and I'm going to feed the bottom wires down through the bottom like this. And then with this platform all the way at the bottom of its movement, I'm going to come in here like this, and then just slide that down like that, and so that it's just sitting right there on the platform. Okay, so that's the placement, and then we're going to tighten everything up, and we'll worry about raising it to the right level later. But this gets us in the right place. so that we can start working with the wires and start wiring up the board. Okay, the next step is to mount the terminal blocks. You should have gotten a number of these with the kit, and they have a self-adhesive strip on the back. Okay, so we're going to need, so I'm going to peel one of these things off. These are pretty, this adhesive is very aggressive, so we're only going to have one chance to put it in the right place. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right over here, and I'm going to kind of line it up with my fingers to get it close to the edge of the plastic, like that, so it looks pretty decent. And then just press it on. And that is going to stay there. Okay, the second one. Done the same way. Okay, just press it on, and that's going to stay there. I wouldn't try and lift the whole thing up by those, but believe me, they're significantly mounted there. Okay, so we have the terminal blocks, we have the board, we now have the wires that we're going to use to mount all these things, and so the next operation is going to be to bring the trigger wires out of the bundle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this is the smaller wire. You can see that these are all slightly larger diameter than this one's, and this is slightly different color, has a different color insulation on it. So this is the trigger, and I'm just going to unwind this and wind this back and separate this, okay, from the bundle. Okay, up to about there. So we're just going to put this aside. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing with the bottom one. So I'm going to find the trigger. It's right here, and then work it around through, and then just start unwinding it. And it looks like this is kind of, I have to feed that through the air a little bit. Okay. And in this case, I'm going to continue to unwind it, because both the triggers are going to have to come up to here. The positive trigger is going to come to here, and the primary and the negative of the trigger is going to come to here. So I don't want to try and bring the trigger up from the bottom like this, so I'm going to keep unwinding this so I can actually bring this trigger up over the top instead of bringing it in from the bottom like this. So now I've got both triggers, which I'm going to be bringing in on the top. Okay. Okay. And so now I have the bottom of the, and what we want to make sure is we're going to cut these things, these wires off at a uniform length. Okay, in both cases, but we want to make sure there's enough slack so that we can mount them on these terminals, okay, but also still not have so little that we don't have enough length so we can raise the coil to the right height. So these are the issues that we're going to have to all balance out to determine where's the best place to cut these off. Okay? So we're going to take a break and figure out a few little measurements, and then we'll come back. Okay, the next process we're going to do is, what we've done is we've raised the platform to pretty close to where we need. We may do another critical balance of that, or positioning of that, but basically we wanted to get it close enough so that when we cut the wires, we know that we're in the right ballpark here. So we're going to need to cut we want to cut all these wires at the same length. This is very important so that every single length of wire is exactly the same from start to finish. But on this board, you see these are a little bit closer, and these around here are a little bit farther away. So this is the one that's the farthest away. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we cut the wires long enough to go to this one, and then cut all the wires at that same length. Okay, so especially on this bottom section. The top wires are all going to stay as a common and go to the positive rail or the negative of the battery output. So that's all going to end up on this position on the output terminal. So we can see that this situation can pretty much just be cut off right about there. Okay, so that's pretty easy. And we just got a little piece of wire from another place that doesn't come with the kit. You may have to get this. It's kind of like a you can get this at a hardware store or anything like this. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a common bus from here across over to the input plus. Okay, so we're going to just strip some of this wire back, and we will add this connection across here. We'll probably put it behind the thing like that, and so that creates the common connection between the input positive and the output negative here. So those are the things we're preparing to do, and getting ready to cut the wires at the right lengths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all these measurements, cut the wires, and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we've done is we've cut the wires off at the all you can see all at the same length. Again, all at the same length. And we've pulled the trigger winding out of the top one, and we've pulled the trigger winding out of the bottom one, as you can see. And what we're going to do, as you can see from this drawing here, here's the trigger. So the trigger from the top goes to the resistors, and the trigger from the bottom goes around to the negative connection. Okay? So that's how we're going to set it up. So so the trigger from the bottom is going to attach to here, which is going to be the negative. Okay? The trigger from the top is going to attach to the resistors, which is going to be here. Okay? And then this is the positive out. This is what collects from all of the diodes down here, like the diagram shows. This is the collecting point here. So this is going to become the positive out over here. We've created this jumper wire that's going to go across from the positive in to the negative out. And this is all going to be connected to that. And so this basically shows what we're going to do. Now, what I have to do for each one of these wires is I have to strip the insulation off of the wire so that I can solder on one of these lugs like this, so then we can bolt it on like that. Okay? So I'm going to do all of this. I have to do this with all of these there's 7 of them here. and then the two triggers, and this gang block here. So I have to put these little quick disconnect things on, and I'm going to solder those on so I get good solid contact. We don't want any of this arcing. And so I'm going to do all that off camera, and I've also built a few little extra wires that will go from here to the negative, and from here over to here. You saw that jumper, and then from the positive to here. So I've made up all these little extra wires, and we're going to solder all these on, and then I'll show you how to connect them all. Alright, so what I've done is I have soldered these little tips on here. You can see every one of these has, and I've checked each one of them for continuity. Make sure that they're good all the way to here. I've soldered this tip onto the bundle, and I've made sure that all 7 wires are attached to this in the solder joint. And I have these 2 for the trigger winding, like this, okay? And I've made up these 3 jumper wires, and I've also soldered those tips together like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire it all together, and then we'll go through the wiring diagram next to what we have here, so you can see that it's all wired correctly, and then we're almost done. Okay, I'm going to show you a close-up here of what we're going to do with one of these so that you can get an idea. What I've done is I've put this extra little nut on here, okay, and I've wound it down about that much, and then I'm going to put the wires on that are going to go to this negative. So we put on the trigger wire, and we put on the negative that's going to go over to the terminal block, and then I'm going to put on this second nut, and then tighten those down like that. Okay, and then this one will come around to here. And then this will go into the terminal block. So that gives you an idea of how we're going to wire this. Okay? We're going to do this with all the wires that go to the proper places, of course, and then we'll come back and show you the finished product. Okay, so here we are. It's wired. Okay, and here's the pictures from page 62 and 63 of the book that we are going to take a look at and just make sure it's all right. So the positive input here is going to come in here from the positive battery. We've got this wire that goes all the way over to the negative output. That goes over here and is also connected to the common of the coils, and you can see all of that right across here. That's what this line is in this schematic here. All the common of the coils comes out, goes from the positive in to the negative out, so that's what this is, and all of this. Okay. Then we have the negative coming in, and that goes to the common negative bus, and you can see this green wire here in the drawing and the photograph of the other. That's the trigger winding. So we come in here on the negative, and we come to the negative on the board, and of course the negative of the trigger winding, and that shows here we've got negative in, and that goes to the common of all of these transistors and everything else, and it also goes to this wire here, which is of course the bottom of the trigger. So that's what this wire and this to here is. Okay. Then we have the wires coming from the bottom of the coil going to each of the collectors of the transistors, and that's of course what this group of wires is, and it comes underneath, and you can see we've attached one of the wires to each of the transistors here. Okay. And then we have the last thing is the positive, or the top of the trigger coming back down into this common resistor bus here that will trigger all the transistors, and that comes again from the top of the coil. This is the trigger from the top of the coil, and so we show the trigger from the top of the coil coming down into the resistor group. Okay, first through this one and then through all the other ones on the board. So that is the wiring of the system, and keep working on it until yours matches the drawings and the photograph and looks as similar to what you see here as you can make it, because this is what's going to make it work. So we've got one last thing to do before we try and fire this thing up, and that is we're going to put some restraining strapping tape around these magnets. We're going to just wrap the whole thing in strapping tape so that when this thing speeds up, there's no chance at all that one of these magnets can fly off. And so then that's the last thing we're going to do, and then we'll put the fan on, and then we're going to run it for you. Okay, so here is some strapping tape, and what this is this is like a thick packing tape, but it has fiberglass fibers in the tape itself here. So I'm going to just tear this off, and I'm going to, you should be able to get something like this no matter where you are in whatever country. I'm sure they've got it. In the United States you can get this at almost any place that sells packaging materials. And so I'm going to tear off a little bit here that has that beginning. Okay? And then I'm just going to start by placing it down there. And then I'm going to just keep it tight across here. And you see we come once around, but I don't trust it. So we're going to go twice around to make sure that there's no chance that one of these things can break the tape or fly out. Okay, so that's the beginning of our tape. So I'm going to just wrap this up. Cut that off there, and since we don't want to change the balance of the wheel here, even a little bit of tape, and of course we have proof that our magnets work. I'm cutting this off at just about exactly 2 times around. sure that each magnet, that this is, the two layers are really sticking to each other, sticking to the magnets. You absolutely, positively want to do this. You do not want to run this without having a physical restraint on the magnets. Please do not do this. If you do, and you embed a magnet in your forehead or something, you will not be able to sue us because we've told you not to do this. So this is for your own safety. And so there is the system. And here is the fan, the very, very last thing to be added. Okay, I've got the little wrench here. I'm going to bring this out a little bit farther on the shaft. There. And just tighten that up. And there we go. So there is the Bedini SG Complete Beginner's Kit. Made right before your eyes. Okay, so here we are. We've got our two batteries. Our input here, it's not labeled input, but we know this side is the input, this is the output, this is the second battery, this is the one to be charged. And you can see we put a little meter on it here, just so, there, good. So you can see what it is right now. And so you can see that the negative output is on the top. Just like the drawing here, negative output is on the top, positive output is on the bottom. Okay, all the red and black. Okay, here the positive input is on the top, the negative input is on the bottom. Okay, and so we're all set up. This is the common bus that goes from the positive input over to the negative output right across the top. Okay, so that's how we're set up. Now there's a simple test that will tell you that the system is ready to roll, and I want you to watch what happens when and then listen closely, when I just touch this battery to this is the final connection, this coil is going to make one thump sound, and listen to this. Listen to it. There. Hopefully that came through. And what that tells me is that it's the connections are all there. It tries to turn on. The trigger is immediately activated, and it immediately shuts everything off in this position. So that's what that thump is. Okay? So this tells me that this thing's ready to roll. So hopefully, if I give it a spin, works first time out of the gate. Pretty good. So you can see we're a little bit, our balance is a little bit off side to side, so we may want to fine tune some of that. But basically, electrically, mechanically, everything's good. We're charging the battery pretty good over here, so if it works this well for you the first time out, then this is really great. And we can fine tune it from here. So there it is, guys. Bedini SG.